should have let off.
Hey there. Full screen. You know what the Harlem Renaissance is? You know what I'm teaching you. Let's go. This is the Harlem Renaissance, an African-American movement of art and singing songs and jazz music. It's a time of ideas and poetry when people started noticing the advancements. Musically and socially, it took place in Harlem, a neighborhood in New York. In the 1920s, when blacks moved north after the First War to find jobs and opportunities, trying to forever outlaw lynches in communities. The NAACP heavily influenced politics and made sense of all the nonsense. The Harlem Renaissance united African Americans and gave birth to many famous musicians such as Louis Armstrong, who played the trumpet, or Ella Fitzgerald, who sung hits. From Duke Ellington to Count Basie, from Fletcher Henderson to Dizzy Gillespie. Because before the Renaissance, it was war and evil, racism and discrimination of all colored people. It was hard for black families to make money and survive. But after the Renaissance, they could conjure up a dime, and it ended in the 30s when the Great Depression grew, which was the point of turning that threw the movement askew. But it still led the way for many black poets and artists who continue to guide people through common hardships. That's it. I go by the name of Signature.
Who's it by? I want to know.
Can I have those names?
That's a good video for the Harlem Renaissance.
Signature. The Harlem Renaissance. Remember that.
Nella was born April 13th in 1891 in Chicago, Illinois.
Wait, whoa. Oh.
Oh, okay.
That's just the right of that. She's right. Not there.
Oh yeah, you were there.
I like it.
So she was in her 30s during
Oh wait, 18.
during the Harlem Renaissance.
Family background. Her stepfather, Peter Walker, was a cook. Her mother, Mary Hanson, was a seamstress. And she had one younger sister. Nella's parents got divorced shortly after Nella was born. Her mother, Mary, remarried to Peter Larsen. She liked Peter's siblings.
What was special about her mother and father? Her mother was of Danish descent, so she was white.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's the only visible black in her family.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nella was the only visible black in her family. Her father didn't accept her as an African American, and she grew up in a white suburb and faced criticism. Nella's biggest interest was writing for a child. Education. Nella attended public school until 1907. At age 16, she attended Fisk University in Nashville for a year. She then moved to Denmark to learn about her ancestors and studied nursing in New York. She graduated in 1915, then worked at Tuskegee Institute in Alabama as a nurse.
didn't, yeah, it didn't, yep, it didn't click forward.
There we go. There we go.
Her biggest influence was her husband, Elmer Arndt, supported her in university.
Why
No,
is this?
well, it's just a little thing.
No, why is his name Imes versus still like Larsen? Didn't it change when they got married or what?
You can keep
Well,
your
you
last
can
name.
keep your
You can.
last name.
Well, yeah, but
Yeah,
I'm
but
just saying.
Traditionally, back
tradition.
then, they wouldn't have done that,
Okay,
so.
it's all I want to know, not need all this comment.
She gets a divorce too,
Yeah, and she's a
so.
writer, so she might want to keep her last name.
Okay, that's
Yeah, many
all I
times
want.
writers do choose to keep their original names or choose a different pen name.
There's what I want.
Books. Nella wrote 2 books. The first is called Quicksand. It was published in 1928. The second novel was Passing, and it was published in 1929. Later, she published a short story called Sanctuary in 1930.
What is Quicksand about?
You haven't read it?
Well, I mean, no,
Have not, have
you
you?
put it down, I just want to know if you know anything about it.
Pretty sure I did.
Mm-hmm.
What about passing?
No?
What generally were her writings about?
Her personal experiences. Mike's life as a black.
Okay, and not just as a black, but because she was from a mixed family, most of hers related to the obvious racism between the two, and specifically Passing is about, remember when we opened our unit, the brown paper bag test? How you could do certain things, you could pass as a white if you were of light enough skin, and because she was the only visibly black person in her family, she really experienced a lot with that and a lot of racism. So she was very blunt in her writing about that hypocrisy in our society. Excuse me.
So I'm guessing Quicksand's more about her being trapped.
Ah, very good.
Yes.
That's what I'm getting from.
Very good inference.
She was famous for the first black woman who received the Guggenheim Fellowship Award, which is granted to people for talents in art, music, writing, and stuff.
Okay. Okay.
Amy's quote, but there was, she knew something else, happiness, she supposed, whatever that might be, what exactly she wondered was happiness, very positively she wanted it. Reference, Nella did not believe that she had ever experienced happiness. She faced criticism because of the color of her skin and knew that there was more to life.
What do you get out of that, Zach?
Why is it?
Because you're the one who always,
Engages
yeah.
intellectually.
I'm sure what your reference says. Say she doesn't know what happiness is because she's always been criticized, and she wants to know what it is.
But what is?
What happiness is.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Well, was it done?
You probably don't have time.
No, we don't need to proceed. What does she like? Can you knock one more?
What?
Oh.
Yeah, let's
Oh,
make
Alex,
another
can you
group.
go with this?
Lower and lower and
Yep.
lower.
She has.
Lower down.
Oh my.
Yep, and we need to move together for a group.
Cut off, just the cut off 3-page
No.
double.
You guys are gonna read those in your groups and then write what you think or what you get out of it.
What we get out of it?
Yeah. Help.
And are there any helps that you want to share with them on what they'll expect in this story or what will help them understand the story better?
It's pretty straightforward, I thought.
Okay. One thing, as you read, it's a good idea to read this out loud within your group because she uses dialect very well here. She wanted the truth about the African American culture to be shared. And so one of the ways that she did that was by using true African American dialect. And just like Shakespeare or any other different type of language that's still English, it has a different dialect, a different sound, reading it out loud helps you hear it better and more fluently. So know that you're going to be hearing some words that don't look right when you read them, but when you say them, they'll make more sense to you. Okay. So you want them to read in their groups?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, work the room. Make sure they're on task, that they have questions answered. Okay, nobody should have their computers open right now, Gate or everything, because you're reading this story.
Why in the front and back? There's a problem.
It'll take you about 15 minutes. It should take you about 15 minutes.
There's only one part.
This road is reading. I would like you guys to
Okay, I don't hear anybody reading out loud. Okay, you're not going to get through it. And the assignment is to read it out loud. So, well, but okay, if that's the case, if you want to read it out loud, that would be great. Here.
In the Forsaken Road, a man was walking
On the southern coast between Merton and Shawbor, there is a strip of desolation some half a mile wide and nearly 10 miles long between the sea and old fields of ruined plantations. Skirting the edge of this narrow jungle is a partly grown-over road which still shows traces of furrows made by the wheels of wagons and long since rotted away or been cut into firewood. The road is little used, now that the state has built its new highways a bit to the west and wagons are less numerous than automobiles. In the forsaken road, a man was walking swiftly, but in spite of his hurry, at every step he set down his feet with infinite care, for the night was windless and the heavy silence intensified each sound. Even the breaking of a twig could be plainly heard, and the man had need of caution as well as haste. Before a lonely cottage that shrank timidly back from the road, the man hesitated a moment, then struck out across the patch of green in front of it. Stepping behind a clump of bushes close to the house, he looked in through the lighted window at Annie Poole, standing at her kitchen table mixing the supper biscuits. He was a big black man with pale brown eyes in which there was an odd mixture of fear and amazement. The light showed streaks of gray soil on his heavy, sweating face and great hands, and on his torn clothes. In his woolly hair clung bits of dried leaves and dead grass. What? So you're thinking, what about this man? If he's got to be quiet, but he has to be quick. He has fear and amazement in his eyes, and he's got dried leaves and dead grass in his hair. What do you think might be his situation? He's in the woods, yeah. Why would he need to... What's that? Hunting, could be. Okay. He made a gesture as if to tap on the window, but turned away to the door instead. Without knocking it, he opened it and went in. The woman's brown gaze was immediately on him, though she did not move. She said, "You ain't in no hurry, is you, Jim Hammer?" It wasn't, however, entirely a question. "I was in trouble, Miss Poole," the man explained, his voice shaking, his fingers twitching. "What'd you do now?" "Shot a man, Miss Poole." "Truth?" The woman seemed calm, but the word was spat out. "Yes'm, shot him." In the man's tone was something of wonder, as if he himself could not quite believe that he had really done this thing which he affirmed. "Dead?" "Dunno, Miss Poole, dunno." "White man or nigger?" "Can't say, Miss Poole. White man, I reckons." Annie Poole looked at him with cold contempt. She was a tiny, withered woman, 50 perhaps, with a wrinkled face the color of old copper, framed by a crinkly mass of white hair. But about her small figure was some small quality of hardness that belied her appearance and frailty. At last she spoke, boring her sharp little eyes into those of the anxious creature before her. "And what am I looking for me to do about it?" "Just let me stop till day's gone by. Hide me till day passes. Reckon they ain't fur off now." His begging voice changed to a frightened whimper. For the Lord's sake, Miss Poole, let me stop." "And why," the woman inquired caustically, "should she run the dangerous risk of hiding him?" "Obadiah, he'd let me stop if he was to home, the man whined. Annie Poole sighed. "Yes," she admitted slowly, reluctantly. "I spec he would. Obadiah, he's too good to all you no-count trash." Her slight shoulders lifted in hopeless shrug. "Yes, I reckon he'd do it. I'm special, seeing how he allus set such a heap of store by you. Can't see what for myself. I sure don't see nothing in you but a heap of dirt." So she doesn't think much of this guy, does she? But a look of irony, of cunning, of complicity passed over her face. She went on, still sidderin' all how Obadiah's right fond of you, and how white folks is white folks. "I'm a-gwine hide you this one time." So she thought, okay, Obadiah thinks a lot of you. And white people being what white people are, if they know you killed somebody, you're going to be dead and hung up in a tree. Crossing the kitchen, she opened a door leading into a small bedroom, saying, "Get yourself in that there feather, Bald, and I'm going to put the clothes on top. Done reckon they'll find you if they does look for you in my house. And I don't expect they'll go for the cat, not lessen you been careless and let him smell you out getting high." She turned on him with a withering look. "But you always been trifling. Can't do nothing proper. And I'm a-telling you, if there one's white folks and you a po nigger, I sure wouldn't be letting you mess up my feather boat. And Elba and Co's all just plain went you higher. I done kept myself out of bubble all my life. So's Obadiah." So she's saying, if you weren't black, I wouldn't be helping you at all. Because I've been keeping myself clean, and I've been keeping myself out of trouble. "I was powerful obliged to you, Miss Poole. You sure am a good woman. The Lord Moses certainly..." Annie Poole cut him off. "This ain't no time for all that kind of fiddle-de-roll. All does my duty is, as I sees it, sure no thanks from you. If the Lord had give you a white face instead of that there black one, I sure would turn you out. Now hush, you mouth, and get yourself in, and don't get moving and scrunching under those covers, and get yourself couched in my house." So she doesn't want him to move and to get caught in her house. And she's still saying, if you weren't black, you'd be out of here, because I would never help you if it wasn't the fact that you were black. Without further comment, the man did as he was told. After he had laid his soiled body and grimy garments between her snowy sheets, Annie Poole carefully rearranged the covering and placed piles of freshly laundered linen on top. Then she gave a pat here and there, eyed the result, and finding it satisfactory, went back to her cooking. Jim Hammer settled down to the racking business of waiting until the approaching danger should have passed him by. Soon, savory odors seeped into him, and he realized that he was hungry. He wished that Annie Poole would bring him something to eat, just one biscuit, but she wouldn't, he knew. Not she. She was a hard one, Obadiah's mother. By and by, he fell into a sleep from which he was dragged back by the rumbling sounds of wheels in the road outside. For a second, fear clutched so tightly at him that he almost leaped from the suffocating shelter of the bed in order to make some active attempt to escape the horror that his capture meant. There was a spasm at his heart, a pain so sharp, so slashing that he had to suppress an impulse to cry out. He felt himself falling, down, down, down. Everything grew dim and very distant in his memory, vanished, came rushing back. Outside there was silence. He strained his ears. Nothing, no footsteps, no voices. They had gone on then, gone without even stopping to ask Annie Poole if she had seen him pass that way. A sigh of relief slipped from him. His thick lips curled in an ugly, cunning smile. It had been smart of him to think of coming to Obadiah's mother's to hide. She was an old demon, but he was safe in her house. So he's thinking right now, they came, they've been looking for me, but they passed, and I'm clear and safe. He lay a short while longer, listening intently, and hearing nothing, started to get up. But immediately he stopped, his yellow eyes glowing like pale flames. He had heard the unmistakable sound of men coming toward the house. Swiftly he slid back into the heavy, hot stuffiness of the bed and lay listening fearfully. The terrifying sound drew nearer, slowly, heavily. Just for a moment he thought they were not coming in. They took so long. But there was a light knock and the noise of a door being opened. His whole body went taut, tight. His feet felt frozen, his hands clammy, his tongue like a weighted, dying thing. His pounding heart made it hard for his straining ears to hear what they were saying out there. "Evening, Mr. Lowndes." Annie Poole's voice sounded as it always did, sharp and dry. There was no answer, or had he missed it? With slow care, he shifted his position, bringing his head nearer the edge of the bed. Still, he heard nothing. What were they waiting for? Why didn't they ask about him? Annie Poole, it seemed, was the same mind. "I don't reckon y'all done traipsed way out here just for your health," she hinted. "There's bad news for you, Annie, I'm afraid." The sheriff's voice was low and queer. Jim Hammer visualized him standing out there, a tall, stooped man, his white tobacco-stained mustache drooping limply at the ends, his nose hooked and sharp, his eyes blue and cold. Bill Lowndes was a hard one, too, and white. What all bad news, Mr. Lowndes?" The woman put the question quietly, directly. "Obadiah," the sheriff hesitated, began again. "Obadiah, he's outside, Annie. I'm afraid." "Shucks, you done missed him. Obadiah, he ain't done nothing, Mr. Lowndes. Obadiah," she called stridently. "Obadiah, get here and explain yourself." But Obadiah didn't answer, didn't come in. Other men came in with steps that dragged and halted. No one spoke, not even Annie Poole. Something was laid carefully upon the floor. "Obadiah, child," his mother said softly. "Obadiah, child." Then with sudden alarm, "He ain't dead, is he? Mr. Lowndes, Obadiah, he ain't dead?" Jim Hammer didn't catch the answer to that fleeting question. A new fear was stealing over him. "There was a to-do, Annie," Bill Lowndes explained gently. "At the garage back of the factory. Fellow trying to steal tires. Obadiah heard a noise and run out with the 2 or 3 others. Scared the rascal all right. Fired off his gun and run. We allow it to be Jim Hammer. Picked up his cap back there. Never was no count. Thieving and sly. But we'll get him, Annie. We'll get him." So it was the man that was hiding in her house that killed her son. The man huddled in the feather bed prayed silently. "Oh, Lord, I didn't go to do it. Not Obadiah, Lord. No, you knows that. You knows it." And into his frenzied brain came the thought that it would be better for him to get up and go out to them before Annie Poole gave him away. For he was lost now. With all his great strength, he tried to get himself out of the bed, but he couldn't. "Oh, Lord," he moaned. "Oh, Lord." His thoughts were bitter, and they ran through his mind like panic. He knew that it would come to pass, as it said somewhere in the Bible about the wicked. The Lord had stretched out his hand and smitten him. He was paralyzed. He couldn't move hand or foot. He moaned again. It was all there was left for him to do. For in the terror of his new calamity that had come upon him, he had forgotten the waiting danger which was so near out there in the kitchen. His hunters, however, didn't hear him. Bill Lowndes was saying, "We've been looking for Jim out along the old road. Figured he'd make tracks for Shawboro. You ain't noticed anybody pass this evening, Annie?" The reply came promptly, unwaveringly. "No, ain't sees nobody pass. Not yet." So she didn't give him up, even though he was the one who killed her son, and he was in her house. Jim Hammer caught his breath. "Well," the sheriff concluded, "we'll be getting along. Obadiah was a mighty fine boy. If they was all like him, I'm sorry, Annie. Anything I can do, let me know." "Thank you, Mr. Lowndes." With the sound of the door closing on the departing men, power to move came back to the man in the bedroom. He pushed his dirt-caked feet out from the covers. Oh, you gotta hear the end. Do it tomorrow. You gotta hear this end.